And welcome to episode number 130 of The Showrunner. I'm Jared Morris, serial podcast host and eternal believer in the power of balancing pride and humility. And here with me, as always, is my co-host Johnny Nastor, wearer of brightly colored Hawaiian shirts and host of the world-renowned Hack the Entrepreneur. We are your podcasting mentors, excited to be with you for another week of talking about not just how to podcast, but more specifically, how to position your podcast to attract and keep attention, and then how to use that attention to drive meaningful results. And this week, we are going to talk about how you can earn a profit from your podcast. Now, some of the methods we're going to discuss will be about how to earn money from your podcast, but other methods that we discuss will have nothing to do with money at all. But they all fall under the umbrella of podcast profitability, and we'll explain how here in a bit. Your challenge as you listen is to identify at least one method you aren't currently using and figure out how you can incorporate it into your podcast profitability mix. So settle in, turn the volume up, and come along with us on this week's path toward becoming a better showrunner. Now, if this is your first time listening to The Showrunner, we are glad that you're here. You may find that this is not your typical podcast about podcasting, and that is exactly the way that we want it. If you have been with us before, know that we appreciate you being with us again, and we hope to be better today than we were the last time. Whether you're a newbie or a grizzled showrunner veteran, if at any point during your journey with us, you decide that you want more, that you want to get serious and take the next step as not just a podcaster, but as a showrunner, we're ready for you. Visit our homepage, showrunner.fm, and drop your email address into the field that you'll see right there at the top of the page. That's the best way to stay connected with us and with the show. And if you ever want to contact us directly, you can just hit reply on one of our emails, ask us a question, and we will be happy to answer. And speaking of grizzled showrunner veterans, this is the spot in the show where we normally highlight the success of a showrunner in our audience, so someone in one of our courses, in the community, or one of our listeners. But we're going to rework a little bit how we present this section. So we're going to take a week or two off from it and then bring it back. But in the meantime, we do want to kind of turn an important part of it over to you, which is who should we spotlight? And we want you to tell us. So is there a showrunner who you think is doing a particularly great job that you want to nominate? Let us know. Do you have a story about how your podcast has positively impacted your business or your personal life? Let us know. If you're in the showrunner community, you can send me a private message there. If you're not, then just shoot me an email, Jared, Jerod, at showrunner.fm, or text me, 214-458-5016. Yes, that is my real phone number. Feel free to try it. I probably won't answer a call from a number I don't know, but I will definitely respond to a text. We look forward to getting the showrunner spotlight rolling here again in a few weeks. In the meantime, please don't hesitate to fill up the queue with your nominations. So, Johnny, I just realized that because I removed the kind of the random question, I was going to do that more at the end this week. There's now no natural place for me to kind of introduce you and welcome you in. So I guess I should do that by saying that you once presented your phone number in an episode of Hack the Entrepreneur. And it's, as you said before we went live here, it's kind of been the gift that's kept on giving.
It's been the gift that has kept on giving now to my daughter, who years later got my old phone number because we moved cities. And so she took over that one. And now she randomly gets texts once in a while. She doesn't reply to them, but she does get them. And I'm going to blame, if anybody knows the writer, James Altucher. He was on my show very early on, and he gives his number out, he says, on his show. And then literally right then he's like, and you should do it too, John. So I was like, all right. And I did it.
Oh, he put you on the spot.
Yeah, and then I did it for a few more episodes after that, because I was like, actually, that's kind of cool. And I eventually said, just take me a picture right now of where you are listening to this and stuff. And it was cool. Like, get pictures from all around the world, people listening. And I thought that was kind of cool. And people did say they really appreciated being able to interact like that.
So what did you do with it after that? Like, did you use that as a way to kind of connect personally? Did you get a little conversation going?
Totally. Okay. Like once in a while, unless it felt like it was. I mean, I took the text like it would be a text from just friend or family. Sometimes you kind of know that it's just sort of doesn't need a response almost. I would still say, oh, thanks for the picture or something. And then other times you could kind of feel that they were leaning into wanting to ask you something or discuss it. So then you would, or if I had more time. It's so low barrier, right? Like I could respond to it in an hour if I had to or something, and typically don't forget about it because I don't get a ton of texts. So
Yeah,
I like,
it's one of those calls to action that we don't often think about because I don't know, it feels so risky, like giving your phone number out because that's such an intimate like touch point. Like only the people closest to you have your phone number, and yet it's one of the easier calls to action for most podcast listeners to follow up on because most people listen on their phone and it's so easy to text. So that's why I just figured I would try it. So we'll
and
see.
they get something out of it. So it's not like go subscribe or go like leave me a review. It's like, well, like I get satisfaction out of helping you, but at the same time, like texting, it's kind of like, oh wow, this is cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would just suggest not putting it in your show notes, not printing that on publicly
No.
online, because bots will pick it up and you will get flooded.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, more flooded than I already am. That's why I said I probably won't answer a call because I get so many calls anyway. If I don't know the number, I'm not answering. All right, are we ready to hop into the main topic?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. Here we go. This week's main topic. Ever since we launched the Showrunner, we have built our philosophy for creating a remarkable podcast on 4 pillars. And those 4 pillars are authenticity, usefulness, sustainability, and profitability. And each one is like the leg of a table. With all 4, the table stands sturdily and you can build on it, but remove one and the table collapses. And this week, we're going to focus on the 4th pillar that I listed, profitability, because no matter how authentic you are and your love for your topic or your devotion to your audience, or how useful your content is, or how sustainable your commitment is, your show will never be able to endure long enough to unlock the incredible benefits that podcasting has to offer if your show isn't profitable. And remember how we define podcast profitability here at the Showrunner. It's not just about money, though that is often a major component of it. At its most fundamental level, podcast profitability is simply about getting more out of your podcast than you put into it. So for some people, that equation is all about money, and that's absolutely fine. But for others, for whom podcasting is more of a hobby, profitability is more about the joy found in the experience, more about the journey than the destination, and that's absolutely fine too. And the reality is, for most of us, it's really a combination of both. But no matter where you fall on that spectrum, ultimately, you have to be getting benefits from hosting your podcast that outweigh the time, the money, and the other hard and soft investments that you're putting into it. And so this week, we're going to discuss at least 23 ways and probably more that you can earn a profit from your podcast directly, indirectly, and intrinsically. And Johnny, I thought it would be a good idea to start off by just giving a quick refresher on the differences between direct, indirect, and intrinsic profit, because that's something that we've talked about a lot. We talk about it a lot in the course. We've talked about it on previous episodes, but just to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page. So do you want to give a quick refresher on the differences between those 3 elements of profitability?
Yeah, for sure. So the other thing I guess to note is that there isn't, you're not typically going to have just use one of these or utilize one of these within your show and within profitability. But there's direct, there's indirect, and there's intrinsic. So direct is the one I think that I feel we think about the most, which is literally things that you're monetizing literally directly from the creation of that episode or each episode. So you can think of the ways that that's done, sponsorships, etc. But it's literally with the creation of that episode, you are somehow earning direct money off it. Indirect to me is you're sort of bringing people in with your show, and then you have to create something else on the side that you can sort of funnel them off of the show to there, indirectly become profitable. So they're still coming in through your show, but indirectly you have to create something else to then profit from. And then intrinsic, in the grandest sort of sense, I think of this as like branding or something, like in the sense that there's a ton of benefit from all of sort of the advertising that Coca-Cola does around the Olympics and stuff. It doesn't necessarily sell them and make them a can of Coke for me, but there's a whole sort of intrinsic sense in like the branding. It can be outreach, it can be sort of giving back, it can just become recognition of your company or whatever it is behind it. But in the simplest sense, I think of it as branding, as in the old style sort of advertisement. And I think that no matter if you are directly or indirectly monetizing your show, you are inherently intrinsically profiting, even if you aren't aware of it at this point.
It's interesting because I think in some ways the line between indirect and intrinsic can be blurred a little bit in the way that
Definitely.
you just described, with it as branding, because that certainly could fall under the umbrella of intrinsic. But I also think it's important to point out that, there are ways to profit from a show just because you really enjoy doing it, or because of the connections that you make, or because, yeah, and we're going to talk about all these ways, because it gives you a real purpose to do research that you love to do, because now you have a way to broadcast that and to educate other people about it. And those don't have anything to do with money. Like, you may never think about, oh, I'm going to turn this into a course. You just love the process of creating the episodes, putting them out there, and knowing someone could listen to them. There's an intrinsic benefit there to you. And I think when we talk about monetization, we talk about what you can get out of a podcast, we focus so much on sponsorships and selling products and all of this stuff. And I think it's smart to do that, because I think, like we said, a lot of times to sustain a podcast, you've got to have a business model around it. But I also think it's important to remember the other benefits that you can get from a podcast, and how they don't necessarily have to do with money. And so that's why when we kind of, created our original curriculum and we started talking about monetization, we decided to talk about it in this way, to frame it as profitability, and to have this third section that isn't about selling stuff, because it just, you and I have both gotten so much from our podcast that isn't about selling stuff and making money, that has to be accounted for somewhere, because it is valuable, it is meaningful. And that's why we wanted to include that in here. So
Intangible, almost.
yeah,
Like,
I mean,
they're not
maybe
things that you can
intangible would be a better
directly
word
say.
for it.
Pardon?
It may be intangible would be a better word for it.
Like, in somewhat, I like the word intrinsic better, but we could sort of, I like trying to get people to be able to imagine or to picture it in some way. And so if it's
Yeah.
intangible, maybe that can fall into intrinsic. Everything else, you're kind of, something has been created. And then you're profiting from that.
Yeah, no, that could definitely, we should think about maybe incorporating that word more. All right, so let's start going through these, because it's important, I think, to provide that overview, because I like to remind you, the listener, about that, and about kind of what this umbrella of profitability is. And almost any single one of these bullet points, Johnny, that we're going to talk about now, we could probably spend an entire episode on. And who knows, maybe at some point we'll do a profitability series where we go over each one of these in depth. My goal for this episode, as I stated at the beginning, is to kind of throw some ideas out there, give a quick description of them, and allow it to be something that, you, the listener, as you're going through this, think about these. And if there's one that you haven't thought of, or that you haven't added, really kind of take it as a challenge to say, you know what, I want to add this to my mix. I want to incorporate this into what I'm doing. So this is more about kind of brainstorming, putting some of these ideas out there, and hopefully sparking something in you to get you moving in that direction, to add something else to your mix. So that's why we're not going to go into too much depth on some of these, but we will provide an overview. And if you have follow-up questions about it, definitely let us know, because maybe that's a direction that we want to go in for a full episode. So Johnny, let's start out with direct ways to profit directly from your show. And some of these are going to be extremely obvious and extremely clear to people who have kind of been around the podcasting block a few times. Number one is sponsorship. And sponsorship is pretty basic. A company pays for some kind of endorsement on your show, like Hover has done on our show, where they pay us money. We talk about their product, tell a personal story about it, give a recommendation for that product. Sponsorship is not one for a lot of podcasters that is all that kind of possible right at the beginning, but you had a sponsor before you even launched with Hack the Entrepreneur, which we've talked about before. And I've gone the route with the Assembly Call. We've had a big sponsor like SeatGeek, and I've also reached out individually and found some kind of local businesses that don't sponsor any other podcast, but they do sponsor ours. So it is possible. What are maybe one or two tips for someone who hasn't yet gotten a sponsorship on their show? They don't have the downloads yet to go to a big place like Midroll. What are maybe one or two tips that you can offer to someone who wants to take a step in the direction of securing a sponsor?
First of all, understand that most sponsors won't come to you. Think about a radio station. You are creating a show like a radio station would. Radio stations, newspapers, all these media outlets, what do they have? They have advertising departments that their salespeople's job is 100% to constantly be going out and getting sponsors. Showing people the value in your show, showing people the potential in your audience and how it aligns with what their company needs. That's your job. Yes, people will come to you. Yes, people have come to me. And it does happen. It typically doesn't happen before you even have sponsors, because people will typically, if you already have sponsors, it's like, oh, well, they obviously take sponsors. So just don't. I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people just wish they could get sponsors, but they've never gone out and tried to get sponsors. Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, it's going to be frustrating. Yes, it's going to be sort of difficult, especially if you don't have sales necessarily in you. But it doesn't detract from your show. It's not because you have to sell the spots, actively sell them. Don't think that they're not as valuable. They are absolutely. It's just your job as the showrunner to go out and prove and show that value and sell that value to potential sponsors. Lots of companies haven't sponsored podcasts yet, and they would love to if it was brought to their attention and you could make it easy for them. They would love to try it out. They really would. So just know that. Think of a radio station, think of how they do it, and then do like that yourself.
And when you do that, also don't get discouraged when someone who would be just a perfect sponsor and you know it, but they say no because they just don't quite understand how podcasts work, or that's just not part of kind of what they're thinking about. That will happen too. And you can't get discouraged. You got to move on to the next one. Understand you're going to take some no's, but you just keep going and you find the right fit. But it's going to require some legwork. So
yeah, and I mean, radio station websites are amazing. And I know we don't want to get stuck on this because we're going to do a whole episode on sponsors, it seems like, but going to episodes of radio stations in your neighborhood or in your city, or just that, or just finding them, they all have advertising like pages on their site and sponsors. And sometimes you can download the PDFs of pricing, how they put together packages. It's an amazing place to get sort of inspiration of how you can put it together too. Obviously, pricing will be different for a radio station than you just starting out, but it does give you sort of a baseline and a confident sort of jumping off point.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run through the rest of these that we have here listed for direct, because this episode is going to end up taking us 3 hours to do, because we have a lot to say on each one of these. But again, we want this to be more of an overview episode. So let me run through these other elements of direct, and then you chime in with one that you're interested in expanding on a little bit. Okay. So you've got listener support, and this is where, just as the name describes, listeners support your show. So you can set something up on Patreon where people can become patrons and they, pledge a certain amount per month. You can also put PayPal buttons on your site. This is what we do at the Assembly Call. You can look at how we have it set up at assemblycall.com/donate. And then people can just donate to you directly or set up recurring monthly donations. And it really helps if you've built an email list, so that instead of just kind of putting it out there and maybe doing it, just kind of having it as an ongoing thing, doing donation drives where you kind of get people excited about it and have a goal, that can really help with that. So that's listener support. Affiliate links are where you basically sell the products or services for somebody else and you get a cut. So for example, I'll use the Assembly Call as an example. I set up a link, iutickets.shop. When you use that link, it goes to SeatGeek. And when people then buy tickets on SeatGeek, we get paid a commission. So I'm very upfront with that with my listeners. I say, use this link. That's our affiliate link. When you go here and buy tickets, we get paid a commission. So it's a win-win. You get tickets that you want, get them at a great price, and you help out the Assembly Call in the process. I don't want to like hide behind the fact that, if you use this link, it's an affiliate link. Be very upfront with it. Your listeners want to support you. So that's affiliate links. And there are tons and tons of companies that have affiliate deals set up so that you can set that up. My big tip for that would be to figure out an easy URL to say and to remember that people can use, because chances are they're probably not going to go to your show notes and click on it. You can also sell access to new episodes, or you can sell access to your archives. Mark Maron sells access to his archives, or at least he did. Hardcore History does this. Selling access to new episodes, I think you better have a pretty strong built-in audience to do that. I don't think that's necessarily an advisable strategy for most of us, but that is a way that you can do it. And then here's one that I had never thought of before, but that I found in researching this episode, which is charging your guests, which sounds crazy, but is an actual monetization strategy that Joe Pardo of the Business Podcast does this. And it sounded crazy when I first heard it. I still think it's crazy. I don't think it's, again, something that most people could do. But the way that he has it, he's very organized with how he does it. There's different packages. And essentially, the the guest, gets a package where they get interviewed, they sponsor the episode. There's a certain amount of like Facebook boosting that happens. So there's a whole package where these businesses can come and kind of use this as an advertising strategy for them. So again, you'd want to have a big audience. Like Johnny, I suppose at this point with Hack the Entrepreneur, it's something that you could think about. I don't think you would do it, but that's kind of how that works. So
why don't you think I would do it, Jared?
Well, in part because on our notes here, you put like all these question marks and exclamation points, which I took as you thinking this is kind of ridiculous, but maybe you're taking it as what a brilliant idea.
No, I think it's a terrible idea that nobody should do. No, seriously, I think that it will destroy your intrinsic value that was inherently being built into your show. I don't think you'll get any good guests because if they have to pay, they're not going to be of quality. Otherwise, people would want them on your show, especially with business podcasts. There's a lot of them. Most of us don't charge money. We create value, and through that value, we directly, indirectly, and intrinsically monetize our shows. We don't do it this way. I think yeah, sorry. Don't want to go against the idea, but I think it's I don't think it's a good idea. I don't want to advise anybody. I want to advise people to not do it, actually.
No, number one, that's not my idea. Number two, I don't endorse it, but I just wanted to throw it out there. And I guess what's interesting about that is, like, how long have we been talking about this and looking at this stuff? I had never thought about or heard about that idea. Now, it's not a great idea, but it does show that there are other creative ways that you can think about monetizing these shows. So not all ideas under the sun have been tried and done. This is another one. Again, we don't endorse it, but I do applaud him for thinking outside the box. I will say that. Again, don't endorse it. Don't think most people should do it, but it's a different idea. So, all right. Do you want to run through some of these indirect methods so people stop hearing my voice so much on this episode?
Yeah, let's do it. So indirect monetization. Feel free to shoot any of them down, Jared, that I happen to say, and then we can call it even. So use episodes as a way to explore topics that you are creating paid content for. Ooh, see, I like this. And this could, as you said, I mean, with the direct and the indirect, they can kind of cross over sometimes and into intrinsic, but selling access to new episodes and even archives, and then sort of paid content, I think selling even as new episodes, even like a week or two before they get published, can be a great addition to something else you're creating for paid content. Like as a bonus or something. I've seen YouTubers do this where these episodes are still going to end up on our channel, but you get to see them a week or 2 weeks prior. And so it's not the main selling feature, but it's kind of an additional thing. So I do, again, that's creative, just sort of packaging of multiple ideas.
Well, and let me also say, I like that. That's even a different idea, because what I meant by this one is using your podcast as a way to explore topics or ideas that you're then maybe going to put into a course. Like we do that here on the Showrunner, where we kind of explore a topic on the podcast, use it to get an outline, use it to kind of talk about it here on the show. And that even helps us refine it further for something that we're going to sell. So indirectly, we're going to eventually profit from that content but basically because this is part of the content creation and refinement process.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I guess I misunderstood it in that way.
Yeah, but your way is good too. So that counts as two. So now we're up to 24 ways once we get to the end of this list.
Nice. These next two are, I guess what I was thinking of when I said you have to create something externally. So this is referring your listeners to something you've created, say a paid community, an online course, a mastermind, your coaching, your consulting services, a book, anything like that you create externally, but that the audience of your podcast would be the audience for this product or service. This is sort of the easiest, I think most concrete way people can think of indirect is this creation of something else. Then there's lead generation. So literally using it as this is your content marketing strategy to go out, go wide into the podcast directories and bring people back to your site and get them onto an email list, which you can then obviously also put them back to things you've created or you want to create in the future. You can use that from anywhere at that point. Networking with potential clients. John, I can never pronounce his last name, John Jantz from Duct Tape Marketing was on this show a year or so ago. And he had that idea of using it to get a hold of CEOs of companies that you would like to talk to. And he's like, but record it, have it be legit, and then put it out. But it's your chance to have this conversation to break the ice because you're giving them value up front, and maybe their company could help yours in some way indirectly. That was, to me, that was so profound. I was like, wow, John, that's brilliant. And I've given so many other people that idea since then. So I love that idea of networking with potential clients. And again, using the outreach for to be on your show, giving first, but with people that you would like to network with, that could possibly be potential clients or friends or things in the future. Create content that you turn into a paid product, course, book. We've done this with the mini course series we did that with. And I know Copy Blogger was really good at this sort of thing. And I think because being part of them for so long, it really sort of taught us the value of repurposing and repackaging content we were creating, and of course testing on shows like this.
And you did this with the Hack the Entrepreneur book that you.
I did this with the Hack the Entrepreneur book.
That's what I was thinking about when I wrote this one.
Oh, there we go. You can host a paid live event. Again, this is utilizing your audience that you've accumulated through your show and selling them on sort of the next level up, which would be appearing for a live event. Even webinars and those kinds of things are ways that you can do it. Live events online, basically. And to me, this is obviously could tie in with the lead generation because you'd want to get them on an email list first and then eventually get them into something like that. And it's something that you would need to create externally. You can syndicate your show to YouTube. So Joe Rogan, I mean, does this amazingly. The only time I ever listen to him is when I happen to be on YouTube and he comes up. He videos it. It's awesome to watch and millions of views, and therefore he sells ad revenue, which is interesting because that's sponsorships sort of, or advertisers, like we said, in direct, but because it's indirect, because he's already creating that episode anyways. He's just got some cameras set up and now pushing it out to YouTube at the same time. So that's clever because it's the creation of one thing, but sort of monetizing it in multiple indirect kinds of ways. Yeah. And then there's the building of your brand authority, and just figure the rest out later. This was kind of how I went into it at the beginning, thinking with Hack the Entrepreneur. That was years ago, of course, but it's a super valuable thing. There's a lot of markets, the business one, the marketing one, not so much, but there's a lot of markets in this world where if you are the one coach or the one consultant or the one real estate agent who has a podcast, you stand above a lot of people as like this authority all of a sudden, because to most people, starting a podcast is just mind blowing still that you can do that. Like you must be an absolute expert to do that. And so us as showrunners, I think we forget that sometimes because we hang out with a lot of other showrunners, but that is something that I've seen it work time and time again. And just like, wow, they have a podcast. That's amazing. So those would be the ones that would be indirect, part of our 24.
One of the methods here that we mentioned under indirect was referring listeners to a paid community. So let's get extremely meta here and let's refer listeners to our paid community. So we've been telling you about this community that we launched, the Showrunner podcasting community. You can go to community.showrunner.fm. When we initially launched it, it was free to join. There was a beta period, 300 and some people got in there. And it's just been, it's really, we talked about this, Johnny, it's kind of blown away our expectations with the activity, the enthusiasm, the helpfulness, the support that has happened in there. And one of the ongoing things that we do in addition to the office hours that we have, Johnny, is we've started these accountability challenges where each week on Monday, you or I will post an accountability challenge. And, one week it was about podcast category pages. This week it's actually about, monetization. And we challenge people to come up with one direct, indirect, and intrinsic method of profitability that they can work on this week, one step they can take toward those. And so everybody posts, and then we go back and kind of check on each other, and we post again on Friday. And people have really seemed to gotten a lot out of it. I know I've gotten a lot from the experience and have learned a ton from all the different perspectives and people in there. So the beta period is over. So the free part, the ability to join for free is over. But there is so much value, so much knowledge shared that it is well worth the price of getting in there. So it's community.showrunner.fm. You can go there, you can find out the details, you can sign up and join. And this is absolutely a way of us indirectly profiting from the Showrunner podcast, is referring you to this community. And we really hope to see you in there, because we've just thoroughly been enjoying it, and we think that you'll find a lot of value just like everybody else has. Anything that you'd like to say about the community?
I love the community. I'm really happy that we created it.
Yeah.
It is, I guess there's going to be the three parts of monetization in that sense from it: the intrinsic, the indirect, and direct, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Sort of the crossover of all of those. And yeah, it's blown away my expectations. And I think it actually has for a lot of people in the group too, which is really cool, and which I keep hearing. So it's cool. I just hope to see everybody who wants to sort of be part of something, I guess, bigger than themselves in this sense of the showrunner, and having people like well, you can be surrounded literally by like 390 something showrunners from all around the world at any given time, that you just need to dive in and be with your people for a bit. That's, to me, this is the place, which is awesome. Because I don't know of anywhere else online where you can.
Yep. So go to community.showrunner.fm. All right. So, Johnny, we have talked about direct methods of profitability. We've talked about indirect methods of profitability. Now let's talk about that third type, the intrinsic or the intangible ways that you can profit from your show. And again, these are not ways that are going to have a monetary value attached to them, or even that you can maybe draw a line to earning money from, but they're valuable just the same. And in a lot of ways, if you're not earning this kind of profit from your show, it really might be hard long term to even continue to earn the direct and the indirect, because I think these methods of profitability are what keep you having an enthusiastic attitude, a positive attitude about it, that help you maintain that authentic connection, that help you stay motivated to create useful content, that keep you showing up. So, I know these are coming at the end, they're third, but that doesn't mean that they're any less important. All right. So let's just run a few of these, and then we can talk about them. Number one, and I talked about this one earlier, having a place to share research that you love doing. Maybe you just love this topic and you love having a reason to go research it and put it together and put it into kind of something useful for an audience. And that really motivates you. Well, a podcast gives you the ability to do that. We just talked about a paid community, but you don't have to launch a community as a revenue stream. You can launch a free community just to host further conversation. Maybe you set up a group on Facebook. Maybe you set up a free Mighty network. Maybe it's just, a kind of a hashtag on Twitter that you talk about with people, but there's a community there and you just enjoy kind of having that conversation going, because, the next one that kind of flows into this is developing a feeling of belonging with your audience. We live in a fragmented world. We live in a world where loneliness is on the rise, and sometimes hosting a podcast and the community that develops around that gives you that feeling of belonging with people kind of, who share your passion for this topic, and you're able to get that. So that is an intrinsic benefit that you can get from it. At the same time, if you host your show with co-hosts, like I do on the Assembly Call, and, we've got people in the Showrunner community, they host a horror movie podcast together. We've got another group of 8 people that host a music podcast together. Well, there's like a real feeling of teamwork and camaraderie you can get with your co-hosts. I know I feel that with the guys on the Assembly Call. When we get together every year, it's so much fun. And, if I ever walked away from the show, I'd miss the revenue, but I think I would miss that more than anything. So that has to be taken into account, and you have to value that properly. And then another way that you can profit intrinsically from your show is becoming a recognizable face in a community that you care about. I talked about this with Scott Ellis, who runs the Lifestyle Frisco podcast, and we both kind of talked about, it's not always something that you want to admit, because you're kind of admitting to your ego, maybe driving how you're feeling. But I know, like, when I go back to Bloomington and people recognize me at IU games because I'm the host of the Assembly Call, it's kind of cool. Like, it is, like, it's just, I remember I was walking with my wife the first time we went back, and this guy stops us in the hallway. He's like, "Wait a minute, are you Jared Morris?" And it was just like, it was a cool moment, because you've put in a lot of hard work, and to know that someone not only listens and pays attention, but that they recognize you for it, it's cool. And you know what? I don't mind admitting it. It's cool, and I get a lot of value from that. And I remember Scott and I were talking about that, and he said the same thing about, what he's doing with Lifestyle Frisco. And then, another way is just perks. Sometimes you can get perks. Like, I can get media passes to IU basketball games now, which doesn't have a monetary value attached to it, but that's not something I could do prior. and there are other perks for whatever your show is. Uh, and I just think all of those things can be really, really important in keeping you motivated to do your show. So, no, they do not fall under the umbrella of monetization, but they absolutely fall under the umbrella of profitability if you take a holistic view of profitability like we do. Any of those jump out at you, John, or are there others that I missed? Because I feel like this is probably the category where the list could just go on forever. Um, and so there's probably others that we haven't mentioned.
I would say like the place to share research, but then yeah, like broaden it sort of out to like it's not even research, just things that you are passionate about and like to talk about. And so as you got down the list, and then you got to share the benefits intrinsically that you've had, you have an audience and years in like sort of the trenches to earn that audience, and so to benefit from those. But from day one, I think you did it because you loved the game and you loved the team and you wanted to talk about it. And
Mhm.
so you're right, like mentioning people, horror movie podcasts, like there's so many of them, but people just love it. Like board games, like online gaming, all these things that people just love so much that they want to talk about. And I think I'm guilty of forgetting this, but I think that inherently, to a certain degree, as humans, we do have this sort of drive to create things, to produce something that we're proud of, no matter if anybody else enjoys it or not. Just to be like, man, that's cool. Like you can listen back to it 6 months later, a year later, 10 years later, and just be like, oh, that was fun. That was
Mhm.
cool that I did that. And so if you keep doing that, and if you keep obviously following the other pillars, you can get to where Jared is, like 4 or 5 or 6 years later, whatever it is, and get recognized for that in more I guess in more obvious sort of ways. But it also does happen, I think, when you hit publish on that very first episode. I think intrinsically you can almost reap as much reward right at that moment in time. Again, though, you do have to hit publish for that to happen. I don't think you get the same value out of creating it and just sort of putting it away on your hard drive and not publishing it. I think it is that satisfaction of sharing it as well.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. So I know we have some live viewers, and again, if you're listening to this on the podcast, we do broadcast these live, typically Wednesday at 1:30 Eastern time on my Facebook page, on our YouTube page, or if you're in the community, you can actually join us with the Zoom link because we post it in there. And one thing I want to do, I mean, I want to kind of have a purpose for why we're broadcasting live, and I think one uh, really easy purpose that we can add is by taking some questions at the end of these episodes. So if you do have questions, let us know. If not, no big deal. We're putting it here at the end, so it won't be that embarrassing if we don't get questions. But we want to offer up that opportunity. But while we wait to see if any questions come in, Johnny, uh, I want to know if you have any final thoughts on this. And I just want to one more time reissue the challenge from the beginning to you listening right now. What is one method for earning a profit from your podcast that you haven't been using that you can add to your mix? And maybe you've really been focused on generating revenue from your podcast, but you haven't thought a lot about these other intrinsic values, these other intrinsic methods of profitability that you can have. So what is one that you can focus on that helps you realize above and beyond the money what you're getting out of the time that you're investing in this podcast? Or if you've been doing the podcast as a hobby, if it's just a passion project, something that you've loved, what is maybe a direct or an indirect way that you can challenge yourself to, hey, I've built up an audience, I put some time into this, let me see if I can earn a little revenue off this. Why not open it up for some listener support to give people an opportunity to show me how much they appreciate the show and for me to earn a little money off of it because I deserve it because I've been putting time in. So that's the challenge, is what is that method that you haven't been using that you can add to your mix? And obviously think about this to yourself, put it into action, and shoot, if you want to let me know about it, Jared at showrunner.fm, or again, text me 214-458-5016 and let me know what it is. Because we love knowing that when you listen to these episodes that you really take something and that it helps you in some tangible way, kind of move forward with your show. So that's my challenge to you. And there are the ways that you can kind of let us know if you take us up on that challenge. Johnny, your final thoughts on this topic, and then I see we've got a question here from Bob that we can get to.
I guess my final thing is sort of a slight addition to what you just said, but it's especially if you are, I guess if it's not completely business related at the beginning, sometimes we almost put off direct and indirect monetization because we feel that it might sort of spoil what we're creating or give us the wrong idea for creating it. But as Jared said at the very, very beginning in the introduction, is that no matter how useful your content is or how sustainable your commitment is, your show's never going to endure that long haul without this sort of monetization. One thing, it can allow you to hire people to help you out and make things easier, but life will get in the way. Life gets in the way a lot less when there's money coming in from it. And don't think about it that it's like you're going to use that money to buy yourself a new Ferrari or something useless. It's not it. The
But
point
God
is,
bless you if you make enough money from your
I
show.
know exactly, but you know what I mean? Or even just like things to spoil yourself. The point is to make it easier for you and for the audience to get this show at a higher quality, more consistently, and for the long haul. And those things fall apart when there isn't this sort of tie of profitability to it, because you can't get the help you need. And therefore things do come up, get in the way. And now everybody loses. You lose and your audience loses and the rest of the world loses because we don't get your creation further. So just work to really change the way you think about it, and go back and listen to Jared's intro because he really states it well. And I do want to emphasize that.
So we got this question from Bob, which we'll get to here before we wrap up. He says, how much of the pre-selling of underwriting or sponsorship should be done on your website, like bronze, silver, or gold support, or do you make your customized pitch to their face? You've dealt more with advertisers than I have, Johnny. How have you typically done that for sponsorships? And I know part of that was through mid-roll, so some of that was done for you, but you've also worked with advertisers individually.
Yeah, so I have a sponsor page on my site now. It lists a list of all previous sponsors that have been on there, and there's some huge names. So it does, the reason for that is obviously I get to post links to people who are sponsoring me now so listeners can find them, but also it does add that social proof that this is a legitimate show, and then it sort of pre-sells a bit, and then enables people to get a hold of me from there. But as I said, Bob, you need to think like a radio station. So those things can be there, but you do have to do the outreach. Each package you create this early on should be fully customized. There shouldn't be a standard one thing, because none of us probably need enough sponsors for that to even be the case, because we're not running multiple shows typically. We're running our one show. And so I would really, you can have sort of a pre-sell on there if you wish, but it's not imperative. I did not have that for the first at least 6 months of my show and sponsorships. It was something that I was like, oh, wow, I should create this. This might help go further. But it was just direct selling. It was getting on the phone with people and sort of proving the value that I could provide to their business, and make that connection with my audience in the show.
I need to do that. I need to add a sponsor page. Pretty much like when we got SeatGeek came to us. So that was obviously helpful. And all the other sponsors that we've gotten, like I've kind of reached out to, and sponsors that we've gotten and not gotten. Like, I mean, I've been told no a lot too, but I've always reached out kind of with a customized pitch, like, and not kind of reusing any materials, which on the one hand isn't very efficient and isn't smart. The only benefit that I feel like I've gotten from it is it really, every time I'm kind of starting fresh. So I'm always looking at, okay, let me really customize this to them. So obviously some kind of middle ground, some kind of combination there would be smarter. But yeah, I think there's definitely, like you just described, definitely ways to use your website to help you out with this.
Right. And like you said, like how your audience wants to help you, they want to support you. I mean, you're saying different calls to action or URLs all the time, but if they know that always at assemblycall.com/sponsors, they can find the links to these things later on.
Yeah.
Even if they forget what that was, like, what was that ticket company? They go there and like, there it is. Okay, I'll click this link and I'll go buy my tickets.
Yeah, like what's the promo code if you have them all in one place?
That was actually how it came to be. I had listeners like, oh, what's that thing? And it's like, you should have one of these pages. And somebody linked me to one. I was like, that's really smart. I should do that. So it's a great place to enable your audience to help you as well.
Next week on the Showrunner, what should be on your sponsor page?
There we go.
I might not be joking. That might actually be what we talk about next week. Alrighty, Bob. Thank you for watching us live. Really appreciate it. Oh, here we got another question from Nick. So Nick says, coming from absolutely no starting audience makes monetization a definite hurdle. I'm attempting to acquire a sponsor and have Patreon set up. I'm slowly developing followers on Twitter, but there doesn't seem to be a conversion between social media followers and podcast followers. Any suggestions to get over that wall and convince social followers to actually become listeners? That's a really good question. Johnny, what would you say is kind of the first step there when you started to build a social following? Because obviously, I mean, there are some obvious things that that you do. Like you want to post your links and you want to give them the opportunity to come over, but that's kind of basic stuff. Like how would you try to inspire your social followers to come check out the content that you're creating?
That's hard. I mean, you can, with Twitter or something, you can obviously pin your latest episode or the episode you want people to go to. You can be promoting that and talking about things, even as you're creating episodes and stuff. Like you can sort of show behind the scenes and share some of that stuff on social. So it's not just go listen, go listen, go listen. It's like it's interesting to them in that sense. If they are your audience, sort of like behind the curtains, they can see, and then they'll be more interested in it when it comes out. But it is hard. I've found it easier to go from podcast listeners to social, bring them over to social, and then have conversations. But it can be done. Just don't, or like when you're selling anything, including sponsorships, don't think about yourself. Yes, the ultimate thing you want is them to listen to your show, but they don't care about your show right now. Like, what's in it for them? How can you help them? How can you start a conversation? Like people like that do that for us. We want to find out more about them, and we can easily follow a link to their pinned tweet or to their bio, and then, oh wow, he's got a show, I got to check this out. But you're not actually asking for it. Like, what is it you help people do? Like, help them do that. Those kinds of things. Like it's like, I mean, in the oldest sense of how we've talked about social media in years past, which is like you're going to like a dinner, right? And you're just meeting people for the first time. Don't just like, here's just, you should listen to my show. Like people just won't talk to you. But I mean, help people, say something interesting, do interesting things, like have conversations, ask them about themselves. Again, we want to find out more about people that help us or that we like. We just want to, and social media makes it easy for us to find out about you. But we don't do it when people are just like putting phones in our faces and saying, watch this video, it's hilarious, or do this. So
it's also easy, and Nick is in the early stages with his show, and it's easy in the beginning, especially with social media, when you're just building a following, to be impatient for results. And I think one of the most important things that you can do to drive people to your podcast from social media is to focus on the social media, like focus on being a good member of that community, and trust that as you move forward and you build a following, you build authority with that following, people will then start to get curious about what else you're doing. But you can't, and I think it's kind of to your point, Johnny, you can't kind of skip those steps and just expect that you drop the link and everybody's going to go over. Okay, so that's one tip, and that's not always the one that people want to hear, because it's basically, I mean, it's about being patient and just kind of building that up. But I think there are some things that you can do on social media that help drive a little bit of action. And I think two of those things are building anticipation and having something that drives a sense of urgency to action. So when I'm talking about building anticipation, it's like earlier today, I was doing one of my banner morning episodes for the assembly call, and it was coming out a little bit late. So I just said, hey, got a late start on today's banner morning, but it'll be coming here in a little bit. That tweet got, several likes, people responded to it. And then, I noticed that there was actually more engagement on the tweet when I sent out the actual episode. So it's kind of like that anticipation where it's like, hey, this is coming. And now people are primed to look for it instead of just dropping the link when it's done. So building anticipation, and then even more than that is, I think, finding a way to build some urgency and even to have something special for social media folks. So when we were building our social following for the assembly call, I wouldn't say that it was easy, but there was a live event that kind of led into posting the show that brought people over. But that live event is important. And I think if you could maybe whether or not it's when you actually record your episode, but if you go live to do a Q&A, or you go live to just show something behind the scenes, like going live, especially going live with video, it just draws attention and people want to click on it. And social media sites like promoting video to more people because they know that it gets more action. There was one time when I was testing out this live streaming stuff with Zoom and with Restream. Maybe I've told the story before, but it was late at night. It was a random Saturday night. And so I was like, all right, there's not that many people paying attention. Let me just use my live accounts for a test just to make sure that, that this actually works. And I literally posted the title, like, this is a test, do not click, was the title that I posted on it, because I just wanted to see if the stream went out there properly. Stream goes out, all these people come over, and I ended up just hosting an impromptu Q&A for an hour. But it was just because it was a live video that went out, and people ended up clicking on it and coming over. Now, granted, I've developed a relationship with that audience over 7 years. So, there's obviously some trust and there's a relationship there. And there's going to be some things that I can do with that social following that if you're just starting out, you're not going to be able to do. But I think that's actually a testament more to people just click on videos and they come over and check them out. And if there's nothing interesting there, they'll leave. But if you're doing something, that's a way to get some people over. And then if they're compelled by what you're doing, now maybe they subscribe and they want to see more. So
they're also very defiant, apparently.
Yeah, exactly.
Please not do something, and they all do it.
Yeah, I did it anyway. I know. It's funny. It's like with emails, like when you make a mistake in an email blast, and the next one that you send is like, "Oops, sorry about that." That's the one that gets clicked on more. So
it's like the classic, direct marketer thing. Like, do not click this link. Do not watch this.
Yeah, but you can only do it if you do it too much, then it totally loses. But anyway, in summary, there, Nick, be patient. Be a good citizen of the social media, of the social network that you're on, to build that up. But then, try and find some ways to add a little bit of urgency and to build some anticipation. And that will help you maximize the following that you are getting.
And especially, Nick, like with an audio drama, that's more entertaining than informative. I mean, going along with what Jared says in building anticipation, like, what does any new movie do to build anticipation for a movie people have never heard of? They create trailers, and then they make the trailers so interesting that it's actually valuable for people to watch, and then they share that, and then people share that. Like, social media loves to share stuff that is interesting, even in the slightest sense, and it makes them feel better that they've shared something before everybody else has, and then people want to do it. So maybe create some trailers and share those. It's just building that anticipation for your show that is coming without saying, come and pay attention to me, because it's already providing value up front by entertaining people before the show even comes out. So might be something to think about, but it's also a lot of work.
So interesting development here. We have some people watching on YouTube as well. Susie and Steve are watching on YouTube. I'm sorry, I didn't have the YouTube page opened up, but I do see that we have a question here from Steve. What do you think the lag time is between regularly publishing your podcast and monetizing any of the three types of monetization? I don't think there doesn't have to be a lag time. You can, if I'm reading this question correctly, you can monetize from the beginning. Johnny, you did this. You had a sponsor from the beginning. You could certainly have methods for listener support from the beginning. You need to be realistic. You won't get a lot of it right from the beginning, but you could have those ways if you want them. I think a smart way, if you don't have a sponsor, but you're committed to monetization and you want to have a spot to sell to a sponsor and a way for them to visualize where it will be, what it will look like, and you want to train your audience in a sense to expect that, then you can get an affiliate deal set up and use that and treat it just like a sponsorship. So you can do that stuff from the beginning. And certainly, indirect methods, you should almost always be kind of indirectly monetizing from the start by building an email list. And we didn't necessarily state that as a method of monetization, because it's like involved in all of them. Like, you've got to have an email list to do almost any of these correctly. So you can be building that, and maybe you don't clearly understand what your monetization strategy is going to be 6 months from now, but you want to have one. Building an email list is probably the most important step that you can take, because it's one of the absolute best ways to monetize, and it fits into almost any of these methods. So hopefully I understood the question correctly. Johnny, did you have anything to add to that one?
I love that. I love the idea of preparing people for that spot anyways. So whether it's an affiliate link or an affiliate offer, which we've done on this show, which with like ConvertKit, like don't say that they are the sponsor, but recommend them, talk about them, and have a link set up, which is I think showrunner.fm/convert is the link. And that's now your ad spot. It tells potential sponsors, it tells your listeners, and it just gets you used to putting an ad spot. And now when you get a sponsor, you have a place for it. That if you don't want to find affiliate links at that point, you can also use that for a really strong call to action to get on your email list. Create some sort of valuable small thing that your audience will like and tell them where they can get it for giving you an email address, and use that as your call to action, but still have that spot sort of taken up, like meaning that you are taking this pulls sort of general lead generation from indirect to me into direct, because you're not generally lead generating anymore. You are specifically and directly telling people, because you're valuing it right now as the thing that will drive monetization and audience building into the future for you and your show.
Yep. Awesome. I'm glad I checked YouTube. So thank you, Steve, and thank you, Susie. Susie, just a comment that she made. She said the intrinsic aspects are the key ones for me. Maybe I'll be able to monetize in the future, but currently the interactions and opportunities that have arisen because of my podcast are awesome. And that is great. And the Holy Grail is, having so much intrinsic, gaining so much intrinsic profit from your show that you literally would do it if you aren't making a penny, but then making enough money that the podcast isn't threatened by other priorities in your life. And look, and anything on top of that is obviously gravy. If you can make a living off of it, now you're just reaching, this incredible, rarefied air, which is awesome. But when you can combine both of those and don't view them as competing with one another, but actually working with one another, I think that's really the main point that we want to get to, and we want to do whatever we can to help you get there. Because John, I think that's how both you and I feel about our shows. So, alrighty, I think we will wrap up there. Thank you for joining us for another week of talking about how to drive meaningful results from your podcast. If you want more from us, if you want to join one of our courses, if you want to view our show archive, if you want to get on our email list, if you want to join our community, we are ready for you. Visit showrunner.fm. You will find what you are looking for. We will be back with another brand new episode next week. We hope that you will be here with us. Until then, be authentic, be useful, and keep showing up. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
There we go. Messed me up last week.
Practicing that all week, so I didn't miss it.
All right. Cool. I like that. I like taking questions at the end like that. I think that
before the outro.
Yes.
Okay, see, I was confused. I was like, is he going to leave this in or cut this out? So I didn't know how to answer, but then you started going off. So I was like, oh, okay.
I want to keep him in, because here's what I think.
Oh,
I
really?
think this way,
wow.
Yeah, no, I absolutely want to leave the questions in. Look, people can, we get to the meat of the stuff early, and if people get what they want and they want to leave, fine. But they can, and I'll put the actual questions in the show notes so people can see. But I think answering questions will give people a reason to show up live. Because otherwise there's not a real particular reason to show up live for this.
But should we not wrap up the episode first and then go right to the questions? It's kind of like a hidden track on a CD used to be. And people know that they're there, but here's the episode. It wraps up and instantly we go into questions, and it's kind of like, it's like completion on.
Okay, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna leave this in. we're gonna leave this part in. If you're watching live, give us your advice. If you're not, and if you listened all the way here, let us know. Send me an email, jared@showrunner.fm, or shoot me a text, 214-458-5016. Let us know. Let us know what you think, because I think you do bring up a good point. Maybe we should wrap the episode, and then we do the questions at the end if people want to hear them.
I love closure.
Bob says he likes after the episode. Okay, so maybe that's the best way to go.
I really like closure. Just like people who don't want it, just like they don't have to miss out on.
That's true. Because the questions might not always deal specifically with the actual topic. So we could end up.
They often don't. And so this and I love your outro. It really sort of just, I think, puts a nice bow on the whole thing.
Okay. And then people know if they hang around after the music, then there's questions. And we'll put the questions in the show notes so they know. Okay. Let us know what you think. I'm leaning that way, but let's get some.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay.
That's awesome.
All right. Now we're out of here for real. See you, everybody.
Thanks, guys and gals, everyone.
Mhm.